Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqna.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's continue on. It is now time for us to hear from Kathleen Weber. Kathleen Weber is a former school counselor with 25 years of experience at all levels from K through 12. She's also an advanced EFT practitioner, certified and accredited by EFT International. Upon learning the truly transformational impact of using EFT and bringing those amazing techniques to her certain students, she's now on a mission to bring EFT to as many schools as possible worldwide, which is such an awesome goal. She supports her clients individually, offers workshops and small group EFT sessions, and provides a variety of professional development opportunities for schools. Please welcome to the digital stage for the 24 Hours Tapping. Here is Kathleen Weber. So one of the places for people who have been hanging out with us so far for multiple hours, I've been starting a lot of these conversations, is when I'm reaching out to folks and I'm making connections and I'm seeing what they want to talk about. I'm always fascinated, like, why do you want to talk about this particular thing? And I know for you, it comes from a lived experience. And so for the folks who are joining us, I would just love to hear like what your lived experience is with this particular audience and working with schools. And then we can kind of get into how tapping came into that and go from there. So just kind of like, how did you end up where you are thinking about these things?
Yeah. I've worked in schools for about 25 years, or I did as a school counselor. And I loved helping students. I just love supporting them. And at the end of the day, they really just wanted to be heard and validated and listened to, and to have a safe place to share their concerns. And I think over the years, you develop a certain, toolbox. And I really felt like something was missing. All of the listening and validating and, I'm right here with you, honey, kind of stuff. It only goes so far. And I didn't see the changes that I wanted to be able to see for them outside of my office. I think inside of my office, I could help anyone feel better in that moment. It was really what was happening afterwards that I felt like something was missing. And just from my own personal experience with chronic Lyme disease, that's really how I fell into EFT. And my doctor, my functional medicine doctor, recommended that I work with somebody who used energy practices and EFT tapping. And it changed my life. It really changed my life. It didn't take long for me to start noticing a difference from the inside out. And that's different than anything else that I had tried before. It was profound. And I knew that I needed to bring that back to my students.
And so when you were mentioning the spaces that you didn't control, once they stepped outside of your office, you weren't seeing what was going on there. Was that things that are systemic? Is that things because of like the demands of an American educational system where this is what we're measuring success on? Was it resistance from other people in the building? Like, and obviously we're not making overgeneralizations here, but in your experience, like what was the thing that felt like once they stepped out of that door, it was hard for them, or it was hard for you to kind of be a lever of change in that way?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say that there's just one thing, because my answer would really be all of the above,
Yeah.
I think that for some kids, it was the family life that was really
Mm,
difficult. I can't change that. Even using
right.
EFT, I can't change that. So,
Yeah.
that the environment, depending on what the issue was, it could be going back into a classroom where their peers are really just unkind to them. It could be being
Yeah.
online and not feeling included in something online. It could be having to stand up in front of class to give a presentation. It could be that their parents are going through a divorce, or, they lost a loved one. There were so many different types of issues that
Mhm.
I saw that our students were facing. And it was really just the environmental factors of what was happening that was causing, that emotional distress for them.
Yeah. And so then once you were given access to EFT and you had that lived experience with tapping, what was your initial forays into sharing that? Was it one-on-one with students? Was it something that was more formal? Like once you kind of went, okay, I now have this new thing that I have access to. Like, what were your beginning first steps inside of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually I wanted to make sure that I had support from my administration before introducing the techniques into
Hmm.
my school counseling practice, because it's different, you know, it's
Yeah.
different than what we would typically use, and I wanted people to know that it was backed by research, and
Hmm.
that I did my homework with it, and that
Yeah.
I was kind of depending on, my rapport with these people that I've worked with for a long time to hopefully have that trust. If they trusted me, hopefully they were going to
Yeah.
trust that this was a good development, a good thing to bring to the students. And so that I really started there before I even was trained.
Yeah.
And once I was trained, it was piecemeal. I didn't just, dump it into the lap of everyone.
Yeah.
It needed to be the right moment, the right time, the right situation. And in my work as a school counselor, I often met with students one-on-one. So
Hmm.
it became, I'm learning this new technique, this new strategy that I think could really be helpful for you. Do you want to hear more about it and see if it's something you would like to try? So I often would start with that. And I would tell them, this is what I use. This is the
Yep.
technique that I turn to when I am really struggling with something, because I have found it to be more effective than anything else that I've tried. And again,
And,
because I built, you're building that trust and rapport with
mhm.
the student from the moment
Yeah.
you meet them, they're likely to go along with you.
And I think the other thing, like one of the things that you're doing in a really subtle way in what you just presented there and about building rapport is you asked for permission and consent to offer them something. And,
Always.
like I, you know, I think about in my early days as someone who was experiencing tapping and sharing tapping, and the number of people I talked out of tapping in my enthusiasm and the way that I shared it, where I just was running people over. And I call it kind-hearted
Sure.
incompetence. Like it was rooted in a place that I believe was coming from a good place, but just in all things, like being in a circumstance of saying, "Hey, I have something. Are you interested in it?" Because if they say no, great, I get a chance to respect that. And maybe they're going to be open later after I've
Right.
respected your wishes. Or if they say yes, like, when a million years ago, when I studied as a hypnotist, we talked about the hypnotic contract, and you would not start hypnotizing someone until you went, "Are you ready to do some hypnosis?" And you
Mm,
just sat there until they said yes. And a nod of the head was not enough. You wanted them to commit to, yes, I'm willing to do that. And in that context, it's super important because all hypnosis is self hypnosis. They need to do a better job of like engaging where tapping is more mechanical. But like that commitment also gives them this tiny little buy in. And so I can see how that's such a valuable part of that rapport building thing is like, hey, this is my lived experience. are you interested in it? Like, that's such a gentle,
Yes.
nice way of doing that.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that, because it's not just in the one-on-one, it's in a classroom setting too. We want
Right.
to invite them in, not demand that they participate.
Yeah.
They need to have agency and a sense of choice over whether or not this is right for them. And it's not my place to
And
tell
I,
them this is right for you.
yeah. And I think that's good when we're dealing with humans in general. I think it's in particularly, I spent, my 20s and 30s full time working with high school and middle school students,
Mm,
and they're in a circumstance in which they have so little agency in their life. They're told when they have to get to school, they're told when they leave, they're told them when their lunch is, they're told what the requirements are to graduate. Depending on the context, they're told how they have to dress, how their hair has to be cut, all of those things. And
yeah.
so, like, you know, they think they're adults and they think they understand the world. And, when I say they, I was one of those kids as well who, probably
Sure.
knew more than my own good and thought I had more control, but constantly being pushed back on and not having agency. Like, the moment we
Mhm.
give someone agency in any context, but particularly an audience that is used to not having agency and used to having to stand up to get what they want, like, the way that you're identifying that, I think that's something that's just useful for all of us who are helpers. Is,
Yeah.
you know like, I'm always reminding myself that I'm responsible to my clients, I'm not responsible for my clients. And in
Mm,
order for that to happen, they need to be engaged with the process. And so,
yeah.
like, by naming the way you're naming that agency is so valuable for them in a group setting, because when we're the authority and we're teaching, you're supposed to listen to me because I'm teaching. And, like, just even noticing that, I'm
Yeah.
sure the students you were serving set you apart from a number of the other adults that they were engaging with in the classroom and throughout their day.
I'm not sure about that, but
Uh, yeah.
I do I just really value that sense of making your own decisions about things. And how many
Yeah.
times do kids hear the word no from
Yeah.
the time that they're born, right up through? No, you can't do that. Don't feel this way. Don't think that way. It's like we're trying to keep them in,
Yeah.
in line. And I think that we do a disservice by not sitting with them in what
Hmm.
they're experiencing and allowing it to
Yeah.
be there. I think that's an important part of the process. And I want to encourage students to pay attention to what feels right for them. I'm
Hmm.
not asking your parents, I'm not asking your teacher, I'm asking you, what do you notice right
Yeah.
now feels like the right thing for you?
And so then when you're working with that population, were you in a high school, middle school? What was the age group of the school that you were in?
Well, I worked in several different schools.
Yeah.
I started in high school, but then most of my experience is middle school, which I,
And
I could
so
hear
then,
people cringing through the through the
so
screen.
okay,
When,
like seventh graders are my single
oh
favorite
yeah,
audience on the place. Like, they're, when you have a seventh grader, you can tell a seventh grader to act like a duck and they won't say no and they won't ask why. They'll just act like a duck. They're old enough to have really real thoughts. They think they're the
yeah,
first person in the history of the world to have those thoughts, but they're not jaded enough yet from the world. Like,
yeah,
they're just the perfect age to be having this conversation with. So you're absolutely right. Most people listening to us right now are going, "Oh my gosh, middle school, you're with your people right now. They're my favorite. They're my favorite."
yeah. You
So
never
then in
knew
those
what you were
settings,
gonna get.
right. It's just like pure humanity at that point. So in those settings, so the high school students, middle school students, as you're doing that, what then was like the entry point to start the conversation with them to introduce the tool? Was it
Mm,
like, and maybe we can talk about that, the difference between doing that one-on-one in a group setting, but kind of like,
sure.
what were the things that, like, how did you start the conversation to show them something that is interesting?
Well, an important part of the process is really just listening to them at first and hearing
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying. I don't want to interrupt their flow of what they need to share with me to say, oh, by the way, I have this important tool for you to use. That completely breaks rapport. You need to provide space and room for the situation to kind of breathe. They need to
Mm-hmm.
feel heard. And
Yeah.
to me, those were just really important parts of the process of introducing the technique as helping them to feel safe with me. And how do I do that? I listen to them. I reflect back to them. This is what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Would you add anything to that? Would you change anything? Would you, do you need to correct me with anything? Just to really try to get on their level and try to see it from their perspective. Because as an adult, we're at a different stage as an adult than they
Yeah.
are developmentally. And so for us looking back on some of those issues that we experienced, it might not be a big deal now, but it was then.
Right.
It was then. And we need to honor that for them. So to me, that is always the first part, is listening, just like we do with our clients. We don't just start tapping with them.
Yeah.
We need to hear from them what's going on and what's important to them, what they need help with, and just trying to ask some curious, open-ended questions. Wow, I wonder what that's like for you. How can you help me understand what that's like for you? How would I know if I was, seeing this situation happen as an outsider? What would I see from you that would tell me that you're really struggling with that? So,
And one of the
just
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was going to say is one of the things I really like about no. One of the things that I find very impressive in the way that you were describing all of that is what you're doing is you're teaching them how to have emotional vocabulary and talk about their own experience.
Yeah.
Because with that particular population specifically, and this is for humans at all ages of development, but they just don't have they haven't been given the opportunity to talk about their lived experience in that particular way, which means that they don't necessarily have the vocabulary yet to talk about it in that way. And so the question that you use there is a question I use with my adult clients all the time. It's like, how do you know you're angry right now? And I'm not questioning whether or not you're angry, but I want to know what anger is like inside of your body so I can be helpful.
Yes.
And so for my emotionally intelligent, transformational, sophisticated clients, they know exactly how to do that. For my folks who haven't had the opportunity to have these conversations before, they might be for the first time in their life going, I know I'm like, my niece one time, oh my gosh, she said the most beautiful thing. She said, my feet are so angry. It's like, yes, like you're in your body talking about your lived experience in a way that I would never describe, but I know what it's feeling like from the inside out. And so not only are you doing a good job in what you're saying there and creating that space for them, you're subtly teaching them how to talk about their lived experience. You're teaching them how to find emotional vocabulary about their lived experience, because fully articulated emotions are short-lived. And so when we have a population who aren't listened to, told what to do, and haven't been given the tools to talk about their lived experience yet, even before we start tapping, even before we start offering new tools, simply by the way that you're asking those questions, oh my gosh, are you doing those young people such a service?
Oh, thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate that feedback. It's important. It's important to hold that space for them, especially because of their age and all the limitations that we placed on them, like you were talking about earlier. So, so introducing the technique comes after that. It comes after you sit with them and what their experience is, and really feel like you've kind of vetted, so to speak, the situation, the scenario, and really feel like you have an understanding of it. Because at that point, then I can start to share, hey, I learned this really interesting and different technique that I think could really
Yeah.
help you. And I'd like to share a little bit more about it with you if you're open to that. And it's weird, like I tell them, it's strange. It's not like other things that we've done before. It's okay to say that.
And I think that is so, I think it is so key when we're sharing tapping with anybody to do exactly what you're doing there, is to say, this is weird. The way I often put it is, this is going to feel really weird because this is really weird.
Yeah.
Just normalizing that experience. And once I go, okay, like it's okay that this is outside of my lived experience. It's okay that this is something that is completely different. And so by normalizing it in that particular way, again, like all of the things that you're doing here with these young people is you're just very gently acknowledging where they are, letting them have their lived experience, and just like setting the table so gently for them to be open to this. And then the other part, at least I have found with young people, is like, they don't ask all the questions the adults ask because they just want to feel better. Like, they might have questions, but our adult mind is going to ask all of these things. And the fact that like you're just going that far and you're stopping and you're not giving them the chance to have their eyes glazed over because, Mrs. Weber is telling us this thing, blah, blah, blah. We don't get to that point, but just giving them enough that allows them to engage in that particular way. It's just such a lovely, gentle way of introducing it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I found that students were often very receptive when they felt heard and seen, validated first, and then hearing, okay, there is this strange thing. And wait, Mrs. Weber uses this strange thing for herself. So there must be something to it. That's kind of, because these are students that I've known, that
that's right.
We talked about before. You build that rapport over time in the hallway, saying hi, having little conversations in the cafeteria, or, them seeing me come into their classroom. So they had seen me several times repeatedly before we got to that point where they walked in my office and were sharing this issue. So there was hopefully already a sense of trust and safety and rapport there, that they felt that they could maybe give it a shot.
And what you're doing. No, go ahead. Continue. No, please.
I was just going to add that after hearing from the students about what their concern is and trying to get those details and really trying to find that kind of area that they're really focusing on, what is bothering you the most about this situation? Because then I can help to narrow down the focus, and I can use that as an example for tapping. I can show them, and I can start tapping on the side of my hand. And even though, and this is what it looks like, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like, and I'm going to use some of your words, and then you can let me know if this is something that you would like to try yourself. Because even if they decide not to, and I'm using their words and I'm using their emotion, and it's their situation, they're tuned into it, and they're seeing me tapping on the points, there's still going to be some level of benefit there to them, even if they're not tapping on themselves. So it's very strategic.
And what you're doing is you're doing perfect marketing. So all good marketing happens in 3 phrases. It's I understand you, I care about you, I have a plan. And when marketing, evangelization, sharing something is done poorly, it's like, I have a plan because I care about you, because I understand you. And when I do it that way, where I have a plan, I care about you, I understand you, that's about me going to you.
Right.
But if I understand you, I care about you, I have a plan, that's starting with them.
Yes.
And so that's exactly what you're demonstrating in that particular thing is, I understand you, or I want to understand you more. And now that I hear you talking about it, oh my gosh, that really sucks. I'm sorry you experiencing that. You're demonstrating, and that's not like words. Like, I can just tell by who you are. When you're doing that with those young people, that's coming from your heart. So then when you say, hey, I have something to share with you, you're so much more receptive to it, because you've started with them. You haven't started with yourself.
Correct.
And again, early on, tapping Zealot. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. I really tell you about this greatest thing ever. Well, that's just me talking about my own transformational experience. That's just me
It's
talking
so
about how
easy.
awesome it was for me. How
It's
awesome
so
it was
easy to do that.
right. Because
Yeah.
I'm living my life from the inside out. Like that the point of my view of everything is from inside of this experience. So it makes sense if I'm being unthoughtful about sharing, that's the place I'm going to start from, because that's the thing that is most important to me, is the transformation I've had, and I want you to have that. And what you're demonstrating is like you get the opportunity to, in a first person personal way, share why it's valuable to you, but you don't start with your story. You start
Right.
with their story, and you start with getting more vocabulary, and then you start with understanding and caring about them, so
Right.
that you have credibility when you're going to share your tool set with them.
Right. And it's the same in a classroom setting.
Yeah.
You know, you go in, you're not, well, sometimes, sometimes you have to go in and give a scripted lesson,
That's right.
you know, but there are times when you can start those lessons by using inquiry, asking them, you know, what
Yeah.
is your experience? So for example, I had a teacher who approached me because her class at the end of the day, it was sixth graders and it was band. She had
Mm.
60 sixth graders at the end of the day, and her classroom lined up with the bus loop. So if they looked out the window, they could see all those buses pulling in, and it was time for them to go. It
Yeah.
was really difficult for those kids to stay focused and do what they needed to do. So
The only way that could have been harder is if they were all eating cotton candy at the exact same time.
right.
Like literally the only way we can multiply all of the chaos for a bunch of sixth grade boys is just give them some processed sugar.
Exactly. It was just kind of a perfect storm, really.
Yeah.
And there's one particular student who was struggling more than the other kids, and so, and this is a point that I think is true with anyone who's trying to bring EFT into a school, is that collaboration is such an important part of that process. And so meeting with her, hearing her concern, just like I would with a student, really giving her the space to share that, and helping her to feel like I understood what she was sharing. And then saying, hey, I have this idea of something I want to try. And I hadn't really introduced it in a classroom at that point. This was my first go at it.
Yeah.
So I said, you know, how would you like to treat this as an experiment? Like, let's just see what happens. And you can give me feedback if something needs to be tweaked, if we just need to scrap it all together. You know, you can let me know if it worked, if it didn't work. And she was very willing to do that. So I created a very quick lesson to go into the classroom, which I'll share, you know, towards the end of our time together today. And her reaction afterwards, she found me and said that was the best lesson that I've had all year. And I knew, and that's back to my point at the very beginning of when we were talking, like I didn't feel like I had those tools where I could help them outside of my office.
Yeah.
That I could kind of implement some kind of change outside of the safety of my space.
Yeah.
And hearing that feedback. And that's what I heard over and over and over. And I saw it with my own eyes. I saw students doing things that they were too afraid to do before, or being who they were because they were afraid to just be who they were, raising their hand, asking for help. You know, there were so many instances where, because they used tapping, because I could help them not only use the tool with me in a safe way, but then teach them how to use it on their own in a very simple, very kind of easily accessible way.
Yeah.
It allowed them to use it on their own very quickly, and things shifted for them. That to me was always what I was looking for. Like that was the missing piece for me. Like, what's changing outside of my office for you, knowing that we're spending time together and that we're trying these techniques? And it's the same with my clients. I'm always looking for what's changing in their lives outside of our time. They can feel better during the session, but I want to know what's changing in real time for them.
And that's one of the reasons why, just over the course of my practice, I've moved away from longer sessions to more frequent, shorter sessions, is because I want the exact same thing. I want to see, what does the feedback look like in your daily life? Not how wonderful do you feel when we're sitting here doing work, but like, what's the consequence of this work? Because an emotional first aid is great. Like having a tool to downregulate an emotion in a moment's awesome, but 100%. Be able to do these other things is it's radically different. And it's such a beautiful thing to see it in that particular way. And the other thing is like, you don't teach a baby to suck its thumb. It does it because it's self-soothing. Once it figures out, oh, I do this thing, I feel better. Once they figure out this feels better, they just do it because they just want to keep feeling better. And they're just responding to their experience in that way.
Right. And that's to that point, when students would come back and see me after I had introduced tapping to them, I would, after, again, hearing what their concern was, okay, let's talk about what is it that you would like to do? Would you like to try tapping? Would you like to try some visualization? Would you, give them a list of things that they can try? And 9 times out of 10, they were choosing tapping because it was effective and they knew that it helped them. So, but again, giving them that choice. Okay, just because I introduced it and they felt better that first time doesn't mean that they want to do it every time they come in. So just always giving them a choice over that.
Yeah. So with the time we have left, I'd like to do 2 things.
Sure.
The first is I would love to just hear some feedback advice for folks who are in a circumstance who would like to introduce and share their tapping experience with the schools in their life. And then the second thing, what you had talked about there, just have you do a little demo, 5 to 7 minutes, what it looks like if you were teaching young people how to do this, just so we can have that lived experience to learn that vocabulary from you. Does that seem like reasonable with the rest of our time here?
Yep. I think that'll work.
Okay, awesome.
So getting into schools, being an educator and having sat through many professional development trainings myself, I struggled when it was someone coming in from the outside. If it was someone who didn't have educational background. And it doesn't mean that it's not possible to bring it into a school if you're not an educator. I just think it's more of an uphill battle. Because we have the lingo. And so, for example, in EFT world, we call them limiting beliefs, but in education lingo, it's a fixed mindset. So it's really learning the different language that can be really helpful. I gave a presentation to a school back in October, and I was greeting people at the door, and this one teacher walked in and shook my hand and looked me square in the eye. And she said, "Now, what are your credentials?" And I was like, "Ooh," and I'm not really surprised by that, but the fact that I could say I have 25 years of school counseling experience and I'm a certified and accredited EFT practitioner, then she softened immediately. But if you don't have that experience, have conversations with people who are in education, your friends who are teachers, your family members who are administrators, who are school counselors, anybody that anyone you're networked with already, expand on that and ask curious questions. What is it that you're struggling with? What's making it difficult for you right now? What do you see with the kids that is problematic? What are some things that you wish that you had that would make your day go more smoothly? You want to just try and be able to step into the world a little bit by finding out from them, what are the challenges? What is it that you love about what you do? And what gets in the way of you being able to do that? And because when you hear those answers and you have your EFT hat on, you're likely to start thinking of some ways that you can introduce EFT to them that will be helpful. So it's really a matter of being curious and asking open-ended questions and really trying to get a sense of what it's like to be in their shoes, in their position in a school building. I really feel like that's the first step, is just gathering information. Just like, I did a presentation with 80 attorneys. I'm not a lawyer, but my husband is. So
Yeah.
guess what? I asked him a ton of questions about
Yeah.
what the stressors were for him. You want to make it applicable to their situation. And just like with students, you're not going to, railroad into, with a student and say, this is what you need to do. You're not going to do that with a school either, because they're going to say no. So it's really trying to develop conversation around it and trying to figure out ways in where you're listening to them first. If you know somebody who works in a school district, that's probably your best way in, just to start. And then you can get the feedback, and then you can get the testimonials, and then you can start sharing that out more. But I think it's important to start with who you're already connected with and having those conversations.
And so it's the exact same way you were talking about with young people.
Exactly.
Exactly. There's an old marketing saw that says the best marketer in the room is the most interested person, not the most interesting, but the most interested.
Love that.
Because when I know what you're struggling with, like, then it becomes very, very easy for me to frame the tool that I have in the vocabulary of your experience.
Right. Exactly. You can work
And
with that person.
yeah. And the other thing is, like, I'm just a better communicator. Like, if you ask me about tapping, I don't know. But if you come to me and say, I have a 6-year-old son who all of a sudden is lactose intolerant, how do we introduce tapping? Like, before you finish the question, I have 1,300 words in my head, because I know what the target is. It makes it so much easier to talk about the tools that I have.
Right.
And so that's what you're talking about here is I am making sure that I'm only giving you relevant information because I know where you're struggling. And because I know where you're struggling, I can speak your language, even if it's not my natural language. Oh, what it sounds like you're struggling with is the way I live, that is the way I respond to that is, and all of a sudden it gives us this common bond and this common way to have that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And to collaborate with them, and I, like you were saying, I just think it's such an important point to offer something that is specific to what their needs are.
Yeah.
Even I have several different presentations that I have planned, and every time I go into a school or work with a different school group, I tweak it every single time, because I want it to be specific to them and what they've shared with me and what they're looking for. That's going to make a better presentation anyway. But educators are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed, and they're constantly being, bombarded with new curriculum and new paperwork and, all these different kinds of programs that need to be implemented. We want to make it simple, like easily accessible for them. So if we can give them something that they're saying that they need in an easily accessible way, then we're knocking down a lot of those barriers to bringing EFT into the school setting.
And the word that you're using there that's so important is collaborate. And part of part of collaborating isn't work with me so I can do my thing. It's like it is very hard for myself to let go of my agenda, because I go, this is the problem and this is the way I can solve that problem. And if I'm in a circumstance where I control everything, that makes sense. But to be in a circumstance where it's like, collaboration isn't, getting your permission so I can do my thing. Collaboration is using my gifts, my talents, my experience commingled with yours, in an environment in which you are the expert. Like I might know more about down regulating the emotional system, but I am not the expert of your school, not just school, not just middle schools, but your school, because the school you're walking into, even if it is similar, is not like it's unique inside of that. And so recognizing that there is domain expertise that I don't have walking in the door. And the person I'm working with knows the culture and what is available and what is not, and those sorts of things. And so for us to be malleable in the things that we want to present and how we're going to present them, because it's only useful if I can present something on a platform that I have credibility. And so I need to work with you in order to have that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for elaborating on that. I think it is such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want me to walk you through
Yeah, let's
my
do it. Yeah. What it looks like. What's the little introduction like? So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, the students already they knew who I was, and
Mhm.
being working in the school building. So, and the teacher was really great about just saying, "Hey, this is a brief lesson," so they
Yep.
already know that it's short, which is better at the end of the day anyway. And it's really just about managing our emotions and how the nervous system works with our emotions.
Mhm.
So I modified Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. I find that incredibly useful to
Mhm.
explain EFT. So I would even have the students hold their hand up, just like this, so that they could see, pretending this is my brain. I really didn't get into too much detail because, again, I wanted to keep it simple. So, explaining this is my spine. We have lots of nerves that go up through the spine up into the brain, and there's communication that happens both ways between the brain and the body and the body and the brain. So, this is a two-way street here. Under here where my thumb is, and I kind of skipped the brain stem because I didn't think that was truly important to the lesson.
Yep.
But just showing them this is the limbic system. This is our emotion center of our brain. I give them a little bit of vocabulary. We have our amygdala here, which is responsible for the fight flight center. Has anybody here heard of the fight flight center? All their hands go up. They've all heard about this at this point. These are sixth graders. They've had this lesson before. So talking about the emotion center of the brain, anytime we're feeling angry, we're feeling anxious, we're worried, we're happy, we're elated, you have all these different emotions. That's what we feel here in this emotion center of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fingers, this is our cortex. This is our thinking part of our brain, the rational part, the critical thinking, being able to analyze something, getting started on projects, being organized. These are all the skills that we need to be able to function in school. And if we turn my hand sideways, you can see that they're connected. When we're calm, when we feel good, when we're safe, we have this balance between our thoughts and our emotions. And that's what we want to happen. That's when we make our best decisions. And the thing is, this part right here functions like an alarm. It's like a smoke detector. So it's just reading the environment all the time, trying to pick up, is there smoke in the environment? Is there danger in the environment? And any time that the body picks up on that, it sends this message immediately right up into that emotion center of the brain, and we flip our lid. We lose the connection between the emotions and our thoughts, and we are not thinking straight. All of our resources are now going out to our limbs because that's fight or flight. We want to be able to fight. We want to be able to flee, because those are our survival instincts. We're all wired that way. All of us, it happens to every single one of us. And we want that to happen when we are truly in danger. We don't want to stop and think about what's happening. We just want to get the heck out of there or fight our way out for survival. The problem is that when our smoke detector goes off, when there isn't really smoke, we're feeling really anxious. We're feeling unsafe, even though the situation that happens isn't necessarily a life or death situation. Like standing up in front of class and giving a presentation. It's not life or death, but it feels that way to the body. That's what's happening inside the body. We flipped our lid at that point, and we can't talk ourselves out of feeling that way. This is the beautiful thing about EFT. We can communicate with this emotion center of the brain simply by gently tapping on particular points of the body. And it can send a calming signal so that we can bring our thinking brain back online. So that's really how I introduce it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I do is I just invite them. Again, we're not demanding that anybody joins. And I just share, I'm just going to invite you to tap along with me. And I just start on the top of my head. I say, we're just going to tap here, right in the center on the top of the head for a little bit. If you want to join me partway in, you're welcome to do that. Whatever is right for them. And then we're going to move to the next point, and it's right at the eyebrow point. And so I'll walk my way through all the points, one hand or the other, and go all the way through. I also show them the finger points because I want them to have access to the points on the fingers and the hand, and I make a circuit. So I go around to the side of the hand and the wrist, and tell them that they can access that any time that they want to in class, underneath the desk. No one needs to know what's going on. So we go through all of the points, and then I invite them to join me again for another round. And I just ask them to take a comfortable breath. I never ask them to take a deep breath. I never know if that's going to be traumatizing for someone. So it's take a comfortable breath at each point, whatever that is for you, and we're just going to do that at each of the points, just moving at your own pace and just noticing the breath, not necessarily trying to change it in any way, just noticing it. And as we go through that and finish that, I would then ask students to share their experience. And I could see it with 60 students. You can see it. You can see their body language soften, their facial expression soften. They kind of relax a little bit into it. And I had the feedback that I needed. So just a really light way of introducing it. And the teacher felt like it was such a great way for her to be able to then use that technique, that particular silent tapping, tap and breathe, right at the beginning of class. And she incorporated it into her warm up before her concert. These were kids who through COVID had never had a concert. This was their first one. And she said it was just such a great tool to have for them before going out on stage for the first time. Really helped with their nerves. It's a very, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's absolutely perfect. Like the one thing that I like to add to that is I just like to, when talking about fight or flight, say, when you go to take a test or you gone up to give a presentation and your mind goes completely blank.
Yeah.
And then you can just describe all of that stuff that you're doing. And they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. So even if they don't understand fight or flight, they all know that sensation of the brain being wiped blank. And when it ends, when they walk out of the room, all the information comes back and they're disappointed because they didn't remember it, that they already have that lived experience of being able to show them that. So
yes, that, and because they're all band students, I was able to use auditions as an example, standing up and playing in front of other people. So there are a lot of really great examples to be able to use in that scenario.
Awesome.
Yeah,
excellent.
thank you.
Well, Kathleen, so thank you so much for your time, your experience, your expertise, but even more so, thank you for, as someone who attended a number of schools, who would have killed to have a counselor like you, who did not have the type of support that you are providing. Like, it's wonderful that you're sharing with us, but what is significantly more important is the people that you're serving where you are in the schools now in your private practice, that sort of stuff. Like that's even more valuable. So just thank you so much for your understanding and your commitment and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you so much, Jean. It has been my absolute pleasure to be here. And I really appreciate all that you're doing for the Peaceful Heart Network. Thank you so much.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.